What's going on, everyone? My name is Wheeler. Welcome to Wheeler's Minis, and welcome to another episode of At the Desk, where I go over all of the paints, painting, accessories, brushes, things that I enjoy and have gotten for my mini painting setup. Today we're going to be talking about just some accessories, some extra stuff that isn't necessarily something that's needed, but something that I have found that has just helped out immensely with organization and painting skill. So today we're going to be going over lighting, wet palettes, and paint storage. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, first up, we're going to go ahead and go into wet palettes. I have 3 wet palettes, of which I use pretty consistently. 2 of them I use more than the other one because the other one is a newer one that I haven't been able to use quite yet, which will actually come up later in part of the storage part of the video that I was talking about. When I started painting, I didn't have a wet palette. I just had a little palette that I was using stuff on, and I was just like, I don't need a wet palette. You definitely need a wet palette if you're painting miniatures. It keeps the paint from drying out, especially in a place like where I am, where it's extremely dry. It's super important to make sure that you have really good, a good palette for the miniature paints that you're using. So the 2 that I use pretty consistently, one of them I use for travels, the other one I use for my home space, is the home space one is the Redgrass Games Studio Painter. I think the base one, it's got a red top on it. You'll see it up on screen. It's got some stuff on it. It's definitely been used. I backed the Kickstarter when it first came out. I absolutely love it. My only recommendation would be to get like something copper or things like that to put into it, because it can tend to mold pretty quickly. But their proprietary hydration foam, as well as their membranes, are bar none some of the best that I've been able to use. And I've used quite a few wet palettes from home wet palettes that I will go into at the end of this section to tell you how you can make one at home relatively easy without spending too much money. But if you're going for something that's definitely going to be used a lot and you're painting a lot, I definitely recommend going for one of the Redgrass Games palettes. They're absolutely incredible. They've got 3 sizes. They have a mini, and then the newer V2s, they have a kind of what I would consider a regular size, and then an XL if you're painting like a lot or using a lot of colors. I know some people who have the XL and they absolutely love it. I have the regular size one, and like I said, I love it. But yeah, it's just incredible. It keeps the paints really nice and moist for a extended period of time. Again, the only issue I've had is that it kind of tends to mold up a bit if you don't paint for a while, but with proper care, that can be taken care of relatively easy. And like I said, getting some copper in there's something with the copper that the mold doesn't like, so it doesn't end up growing. The second palette that I use, which is mostly on my travels, is the Game Envy Exemplar wet palette, which I find to be absolutely incredible. It's got storage space on the top of it so that you can take it on the go with you. It's really easy to, act as a portable wet palette. It has clips on the side that really keep it airtight, so you're not going to have any spillage if you put a little bit extra water in there when you're moving around with it. They're sheets that they use for the wet palette. I guess I should say this first. A wet palette is basically a sponge with a piece of paper. Most of the time it's parchment paper. And it just keeps it relatively moist without oversaturating it with water, which will make it so that your paint doesn't thin. It just keeps it moist. Their paper is definitely parchment paper. I don't know if it's like a proprietary parchment paper that they have, but it's a really good wet palette. I used it when I was at a con recently to paint, and it kept the paints wet for the entire 8 hours that I was painting with it. Definitely a great purchase. Game Envy has some really awesome stuff that is just, it's good for painting. I got put onto them by Lila Mev, who I am a patron of, who is also an amazing miniature artist. If you have a chance, definitely go and check her out. But I've been super, super happy with it. And it's been honestly one of the better wet palettes that I've been able to use. I think it's not too hard to mess up. Like, I don't think it's too hard to get a wet palette right, I should say. But those are the two that I use pretty consistently. One that I'm interested in getting is the new Army Painter Wargamer wet palette that came out, because it just has a ton of modularity to it. Not in the sense that you can like build on top of it, but it has many different things that you can use within it. So it has a speed paint palette. It has a regular wet palette for your paints. It comes with a small little storage space for like brushes and things. So just something like that, like, is something that I'm looking forward to, and definitely something that I'm probably going to grab in the near future when it becomes available. But yeah, those are the wet palettes that I use. I recommend all three of them. Because especially, I haven't used the Army Painter one yet, but because of the fact that it has spaces for specifically speed paints, which I use quite often, that is a plus for me. I've noticed no real issues with the paints that I put on it. It keeps them relatively moist, like I said. The only issue is, like I said previously with the Redgrass Games palette, is to just get some copper pieces. Ironically, Game Envy actually sells these. They're like, I'm pretty sure they're copper plated pieces of metal, but they're called palette shields. They've been working great for me. I haven't had any mold problems since I got them. I got them for each of my wet palettes that I have. And I haven't had no issues with mold since then. So definitely something I recommend. The Exemplar palette is relatively decently priced. The Redgrass Games palette, because it is a lot of proprietary stuff, tends to be a little bit more expensive, but I think that it's worth it because their membranes that they have for their paper are completely 100% reusable. And I've been able to go through one piece of paper for probably 5 or 6 different iterations of putting paint on it. I just have to wash it off, just take warm water on a paper towel and just kind of like slowly wipe. Works a charm. But yeah, that's the wet palettes for you. And let's move on to organization, which I'm very excited about. So organizationally, originally I had just a bunch of paint on the desk or in a box that I was using to kind of grab the paints that I needed, until I decided that I wanted to do something a little bit better, something that fits my space better and the style of what I wanted to have the space look like. I'm really into dark academia. I love like dark woods and like deep greens and things like that. And I was actually watching a video by Ninjon, and he was sponsored by the people that I absolutely love and recommend to every single person if you have the finances for it, and that's Frontier Wargaming. I have their paint station that is like my personal paint station. You can actually see it in the video right here. It is a little expensive, but man, is it worth it. It took me about 3 hours to put together, but I probably have, I would say, 250 paints, and it holds every single thing. They come, the modularity with this one is actually modularity where you can get specific aspects to fit your space better. Their website is super easy to use. They are a European country, or a European business. So if you're purchasing in the US, you will have to pay for overseas shipping, which can be a little expensive, but I 100% recommend their stuff. Again, it takes a little bit of time to put together, but honestly, I am so happy with how my space looks now. It's so well organized. It's so much better than it was prior. I can see the paints that I need with relative ease. And not only that, they also have aspects of it that give you like small little tool drawers that you can use, things that you can put brushes in, that you can put green stuff in, that you can put, any kind of tools that don't necessarily fit on the specifics of what your painting station is. It's great. I absolutely love them. Now there are other organizational things that you can get. There's a lot of 3D printed organizational things if you have an FDM printer that a lot of people are starting to put out that are modular, that can tend to be a little bit cheaper. So I definitely recommend, if you are balling on a budget, to look towards those. They are relatively easy to find. There's a lot of people who are starting to make that as part of their business, not only just like selling paints or models or things like that, but making the organizational space so that you can use it and be more organized in your mini painting, because Lord knows that we need to do that more. We already have a massive horde of unpainted things. Having paints just all over the place tends to be a little not fun, and definitely adds to the stress of painting. But like I said, highly recommend Frontier Wargaming. They have wall racks. They've got racks that you can put just directly on your table. They have, you know, spaces for if you want to put a laptop on something, or if you want to put a desktop on something. Like if your painting station is also a streaming station for things like that, I definitely recommend looking at them for that. The other thing I recommend them for is portable painting stations. They actually have those, and you can get it kind of made to order. I have a logo that my friend made for me that you've probably seen on some of my videos, and I got to get that laser engraved into the front of it. So now it kind of acts as its own marketing thing, where if I take that with me, I can now paint and people can see my logo, come up and ask about it, and know that that's what I'm about. I have their paint case 2.0, which is absolutely incredible. It really is everything that I need. They have a larger edition that is a paint chest. So if there's a multi-day con that you're going to, that's, your job is painting, or if you want to take a bunch of stuff with you, I recommend that as well. Again, it can be a little bit pricey, but if you are as invested, especially when I started the business, I really wanted to have something that I could take with me to cons, because a lot of my friends go to cons and I like to go with them, and having something to paint while I'm there makes it a lot easier and a lot nicer of a time. So that way it's not just you're sitting there for hours on end trying to figure out what to do. But I really, really do recommend them. Again, they are overseas if you're in the US, so you will have to pay shipping for that, but in my opinion, it's been 100% worth it. They get it in a timely manner. They're really, really kind. The customer service, absolutely incredible. I love my paint case. I used it at a con recently, and it became one of the best purchases that I ever had. And on that note, I actually they have a wet palette that fits within the paint case. And this is the third wet palette that I haven't had a chance to really use yet, but it's just a tiny little, paint on the go wet palette that's great for a few colors. It's got a pretty standard sponge in it. And yeah, it's just, it fits in the case, which is the most important thing, which, is helpful, because some wet palettes are quite large and they tend to be a little bulky. So having one that fits within the case is really nice. And I'm going to stop here for a second because I forgot to say something. How to make your own wet palette. It's not super difficult. If you are balling on a budget and you need a wet palette that is easy to make, you can make it at home. What I recommend is getting sponges that don't have any scratchy surface but are pretty decent sponges. You can get anti-mold sponges, or you can just do the copper trick that I was talking about earlier, and parchment paper, as well as a airtight sealable plastic container. The ones with the clips on the side are actually best for it. My first wet palette that I got, one of my close friends made for me, and it's as easy as making sure that the sponges are in there and fit the space that it's in, making sure that there's water inside the space and the sponges are at least not drenched, but at least have some water in them, and then put the parchment paper on top, cut it to size, and there you go. Budget wet palette. It works a charm. It's really, really nice to know that that's something you can make at home and you don't have to, break the bank going after something expensive if you don't have the money for it. I mean, you're looking at maybe, if you go to a dollar store, you're looking at maybe $12 worth of materials to get everything that you need, versus paying, $35 for a wet palette that is specifically made to be a wet palette. So, yeah, I just wanted to get to that because I forgot to when I went to the wet palettes. So that's it. All right, back to storage. There's a lot of 3D printed files out there that you can get for brush storage. I have a few that I've printed out that I absolutely adore, but really when it comes to storage and organization, like I said, Frontier Wargaming is the way to go. And if you have an FDM printer, again, you can find other storage and organizational options on Printables or certain websites that are people who have their own websites that make the models for them. You can go to Thingiverse, you can go pretty much anywhere you can find STL files and find something that you can use for it. I've got a few for my brushes, but mostly I use the Frontier Wargaming stuff for my paints. So that's it for the organizational part. Yeah. I guess the last thing that's up is, well, we'll do a little bit of accessories after the lighting, but the next up is lighting. So, when it comes to lighting your space, you really want to make sure that you have proper light to make sure that you know how the paint is going onto the model. I didn't think it was that important, and then I started painting with the light and I realized that I was completely wrong and that painting with the light is extremely important. My original lighting setup was just an OttLight and a thrifted LED light that I could put into the space. There are more expensive options out there. One of them is the one that I currently have that I've been super ecstatic about, and I will get into that in a second. But really just making sure you have proper kind of neutral tone lighting so you have a better idea of what your model is going to look like, especially while you're painting it. So Joann Fabrics, Hobby Lobby, Michaels, they'll all have some kind of lighting like OttLights that are usually used for fabric sewing and things like that, but they work just as well for this. So they're relatively cheaper. You can also make one on your own if you want, where you can get a kind of neutral toned LED strip and just kind of print out like a little arc and put it over top of where your station is, so you get a better idea of what the light's going to look like. Now, if you have the money for it, I highly recommend the Redgrass Games R9 desk lamp. I backed its Kickstarter, and it has been absolutely incredible. We can see specific colors based off of how they reflect back towards us, and that drastically changes depending on the light source. So our day-to-day life, we actually are seeing most of the time not even 100% what the color is supposed to be, but pretty high up there. The sun is a really good reflector of what the colors actually are. Now, the R9 Redgrass Games desk lamp is pretty close to that, and based on the research that they did and a lot of the work that they've put into it, it's actually one of the most color accurate lighting that you can get on the market. I think it's something like 92% accurate on the like color scale of what the color is supposed to be versus what we see in it, and it's absolutely incredible. It's a cool it's got a nice arm that you can clamp onto a desk and kind of put in the space. It's got two really nice movable lighting sticks that kind of go out. It's relatively easy to use. You can change the degree at which the light is shining. I like mine to be a bit brighter, and it comes in a very, very nicely made metal kind of situation. It's not too hard to put together. It's just good lighting. I cannot recommend it enough. I got it last year and I was going to make a video on it like a month after I got it, and I just got so busy, but I'm finally reviewing it. 100% worth it if you have the money for it. It is a little expensive, but I can't recommend it enough, especially if you're getting into mini painting and you want to be more aware of the colors that you're putting on your miniature. It's just, bar none, the best lighting that I've been able to get so far. Again, I haven't tried too much, so take this with a grain of salt. I do plan on getting more lighting in the future, specifically lighting that I can take with me on the go for my portable paint case so I can paint at cons and things like that. But it is, bar none, one of the best on the market, well worth the money that you're going to be spending on it. And yeah, it's just great. You can actually see it in the video right here. I've got it a little high, but you can maneuver it, you can turn it. The only thing that tends to be a little bit weird on it is the lighting tends to tilt a little bit, and that's probably just because it doesn't have, it's two long pieces of LED that probably are weighing it down in a way, but I'm sure that can be fixed with, you know, a little bit of support on the opposite side or something of the sort. So yeah, that's what I recommend for lighting. Again, that's the expensive option. If you're going for a cheaper option, OttLights or things like that, you can get at, you know, Joann Fabrics or really any hobby store. I highly recommend as well, because they have really good neutral tone, mostly cool tone, but neutral tone lighting that helps you see your model better and see the paint on the model better overall. But yeah, that's it for lighting. And last but not least, we'll go into just kind of minor accessories that I think have been a really nice addition to my mini painting station. All right, first up we have brush cups. It's important to make sure that you are using water to rinse your brushes out, especially if you want to keep your brushes alive for a longer time, and especially if you have sable hair brushes, which need to be, you know, taken care of to a little bit of a higher degree. The few that I have right now are the Green Stuff World brush rinser, which is kind of like a it's got a little plunger and it just refills the cup. I'm sure you've seen it probably on you know, Twitter or whatever. There's a bunch of them off of you know, like wish.com kind of sites that are cheaper, but I love it. It is a really nice addition because it keeps, you know, clean water in the space, and that makes it so that you're not cleaning a brush in already dirty water. But if that's not something that you're interested in and you really just want a paint cup, there are many out there that you can get. A regular cup is honestly fine as long as you're cleaning out the water every once in a while. I recommend every like 2 hours or so cleaning out the water, or if you're painting really, you know, fervently, when you start to notice that it's more opaque and there's not really any, like if you're picking up your brush and damping it out and it's picking up whatever pigments in that water, highly recommend cleaning out the water then too. But the other one that I have is also Game Envy, and it is a portable cup that's actually just like a pop-up, pop-out kind of cup with their, it's a like silicone squeegee that falls to the bottom of the cup, so you can use it to kind of brush your brush through. It has been amazing. It fits inside of my paint case. It's really good portable, takes up not a lot of space, and it works extremely well. So I definitely highly recommend that as well. They're on their website. Pretty much everything you can find on Game Envy's website that I talked about Game Envy, but the rest of the stuff I'll actually put in the description below. So if you are interested in it, you can go and look at it. These are all, again, my personal recommendations. I have started to get back into painting more and more, and I'm trying to get back into it a lot more, especially because I have so much stuff that I've put into making sure that I can use the space to the best possible way that I can. Next up though is mostly stuff that you can make if you really want to. I got put onto it by Lila as well, but a dry brush kind of brush palette where it's got texture is, I find, integral, especially making sure you have the right amount of paint on the brush. Now I 3D printed mine. There are many files out there that you can do to 3D print, but you can also get, you know, dollar store pieces of things and kind of hot glue them into a little tray that you can get at the dollar store as well, which I think is what Lila did. And it works a charm. It helps you have a better understanding of how much paint is on the dry brush or just brush in general, and makes it so that you're not oversaturating, because if you're like me, before I had it, I was putting paint on the brush and just wiping, and it would be way too much paint. And the other thing that it helps is making sure that the paint stays wet, because if you're using a paper towel to wipe off the brush, it can get a lot of the moisture out of the paint and it ends up looking chalky, which sometimes you might want, but other times you might want it to be more of a smooth, you know, application. So I recommend it. It's been awesome at the table that I paint at, and definitely something I recommend. Now, the last thing that I'm going to recommend is a good miniature holder. Now, Redgrass has one. I have two of those. They're smaller. They're definitely meant for smaller models. but they work really, really well. They have a magnet on the bottom of them, so you can actually put them on a space, and they come with a little metal piece that you can kind of put places so you can actually just stick it to wherever. I have one for my home station and one in my paint case. And the other one that I use is Game Envy as well. They have one that is kind of a broader grip and makes it easier to hold. Again, something I was put on by Lila, and I love it. It comes with, you can get it with a little like hook on the side that's like an armrest, so you can have more stability when you're painting. And the hook kind of comes in two sizes, for, you know, one for more normal sized, what I would consider miniatures, and one for larger miniatures as well. And you can never go wrong. It's very easy to make one at home if you want. You know, if you have any leftover bottles that you had for medication, or, you know, Tylenol bottle, ibuprofen bottle, and some sticky tack, blue tack, stuff like that, you can just put some of that on top, put it on there, and you can use that as painting. Used to paint holding the model, and I find that it gets a lot of the paint off because the natural oils in your skin kind of pull the paint away from the model. So it's really nice to have a space where you don't have to touch the model, and normally it'll just stay put where it needs to. But yeah, I think that is it for the things that I recommend. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for sticking around and watching the end of this video. If you're here, I appreciate it. These are just, you know, again, my personal opinions on the things that I use in my day-to-day mini painting, that I was really excited about, and definitely have made my space a lot less stressful, specifically with the organizational materials. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you recommend, that you like using, or that, you know, you have used and found that it's one of the best things that you've ever used. I would appreciate it. I really look forward to seeing comments on things like this, because you know, I've only been painting for a few years, and I know people have been painting for a lot longer. So there are a lot of people who have more opinions and more, you know, experience than I do. And I love hearing from you guys. So again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Like the video if you can, it really helps out. Subscribe to the channel, and look forward to the next At the Desk video. Yeah, thanks for joining, guys, and I will see you next time.